Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay jewelry video at keepsakecrafts.net. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this bracelet with tube beads. I've seen a lot of designs like this floating around Pinterest and the internet, and I really wanted to make my own. There are a lot of steps, but I love the rich textured look. So one of the things experience has taught me is that you don't want to just start in with making your tube beads. You actually want to start with finding your findings. Now, there are some bead caps that simply aren't going to work well with this design, and I have a few examples here, like these are just far too shallow. You need something deep for all the cords to go into and be glued into. Now your cords are going to be glued in, so I really don't recommend any kind of filigree piece that has a lot of holes or piercings for the glue to ooze out. Not an attractive look. You really don't want to see those cord ends. I have seen some of these designs done with bead cones. These are solid, so the only place the glue is going to come out is the top and the bottom, and that can be wiped off. These are a little small, but maybe if you found bigger ones. But this is what I think is ideal. It's not cone-shaped, but cylindrical, so your cord ends are going to fit right into it. And then decide what size I'm going to make my beads based on this. Now here's one that I've already glued the cord into, but you can see just how nicely that fits in there. Now I've looked at a lot of bracelets of this design. In fact, I made a whole Pinterest board of polymer clay tube bead bracelets, and one of the looks I did not care for is when there were just a few cords going through the tubes and they didn't fill it completely. So if the cords didn't fill the tubes completely, to me it just looked skimpy. So for me, I wanted to choose my cap first and then choose a form for my tube that just barely fit into the cap. So then you can choose whatever you want for fibers. These are hemp. I chose these three from this one, and then the teal and the chartreuse from this one, and I used 3 yards of each for a total of 15 yards, although I think if I had it to do over, I'd use 4 yards of each for a total of 20 yards. I cut them into 1 yard lengths, folded them in half, and then folded them in half again, and then tied them in the middle. Used an extra bit of cord to tie this end, trimmed all the ends neatly, and then glued them into my bead cap. Now before I did that, I added a head pin, and you can see the holes on these are big enough that the head pin goes right through. So one solution is to add a bead or some kind of a spacer. So I have this little bead cap that I actually flattened out with a pair of pliers. Just like that. Pop that in there. And the reason I chose this was that that lies nice and flat inside there, so when my cord ends go in, they will all go in evenly. Don't know if that was necessary, it was just a detail I thought of. But then once you put that in there, you just put your epoxy, like a 5-minute epoxy in there, tuck it in, and then leave it to dry for a good long time, till it's completely dry. So then the next step is to choose a form that you're going to create your tube beads on, and you can find all sorts of things. This is one of my dapping punches that just barely fits in there. I also have this little glass vial, which might be a little big for this project. There's also these glass vials. They're a Tim Holtz product, which I love using, and you might find things here or just any kind of tool that you can wrap a piece of paper around and make a form to create your beads on. And then all you do is cut strips of paper, wrap them around the form, and I like it to go around a few times so that it's nice and rigid. Add a piece of tape right here along the seam, and then you can form your tube beads right on it. In fact, you don't even need a form long enough to make all the beads you want to make, because you can just slide them right off, like I have here. I have a few made already. You could slide them right off and make another one and make as many as you need. Now to make your tube beads themselves, you have a couple of options. First of all, you can make a base bead and then form something else on top of it. You can see here that's what I've done. I've got an inner core that I just made plain, and then I put the textured clay on top of it. Or, like this one, I textured this clay and then made it into a bead. And it's very simple. You just cut a couple of straight edges. I made mine somewhere between 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch. So you cut 3 edges that are straight. I like to put my form back in while I'm rolling the clay on it so that it behaves itself. And then just like any time you roll up clay, you shape that on there, move it, it makes a mark. Cut just inside that mark. And then you can smooth that. Use a tool if you want to smooth that seam. I like to use my blade to kind of straighten those edges. And then bake. And here are some cores that I already baked, and then you just kind of give the, just kind of grab it. You can flex the paper away from it, or just a good tug will pull it right off. Now you can put anything you want on here. Here are a few examples from my Pinterest board. You can put slices of makume gane, you can put canes, you can put anything with any kind of surface treatment that's in sheets. But you can also sculpt on these, which I found to be kind of fun. And then what I like to do, of course you can do yours in just a solid color, but I really like having a wide variety of colors. And so what I did was I started with these 2 colors. I had in mind to do teal and chartreuse. Just lately that combination has been making me really happy. And so what I have here is some wasabi by Primo, and this is peacock pearl. Choose like a darker and a lighter color. And then what I did was I made a blend out of these, and I did something that the Polymer Clay tutor taught in a really great video. I will link to it, using pivot colors to get a whole wide variety. She made a blend, cut it into little pieces, and then combined all those little pieces with another color. Now I found the wasabi and the peacock pearl started to get me too much green, so I used ultramarine blue as my pivot color and kind of brought this more back to blue. And by mixing little bits of colors from a scrap bin with the wasabi to peacock pearl blend, I got a whole bunch of different colors. You don't have to go to all that, you can just use a couple. I just like the richness of the look. Now for the first design, I took those colors and I rolled a whole bunch of little tiny balls out of them. This was tedious. It was a good thing to do with a video playing or listening to an audiobook. And I made this bead, which looks similar to one on my Pinterest board, which I always love. It always stops me every time I come across that. I just love this look. And it's really quite simple, if a little time consuming. You just want to be sure that your bead is coated with TLS. So I could hold this and do the whole thing at once. I used some photographer's wax, it's really sticky wax stuff. Went back to my original form, put a little bit of that on there, put my bead in there, and now I have a handle to hold it with. And then you just want to put a thin coat. Make sure it's thin. If it's too thick, things are just going to slip and slide around and be annoying. And then just start placing dots. And that's all there is to that. You just pop them on. Don't overthink the color placement, just kind of pick up the next one that comes to hand. Fiddly, but a really great textural look. So it's my hope to inspire and encourage you with these videos, and if you've benefited, I hope you'll consider becoming a patron. You can support my tutorials with $1 a month or whatever you can afford, and you can check out my Patreon page for details on the rewards you'll receive for helping out. Now this one is a variation of that one. I made little snakes of clay and made little S curls, and then in and amongst them I placed dots, and then I used a little tiny ball tool and went through and just made a divot in each of the dots. And that's another look, another kind of texture that you get. For this one I just rolled thin as possible little snakes of clay, probably a little longer than that. Coated my tube with TLS and then just started wrapping them around. trying not to have them be too regular. And that's a fantastic texture and very interesting. Of all the bracelets I looked at though, the ones I liked the best were the ones that just had an embossed texture with a texture plate. Now you could do this with a solid sheet of clay, but I always like to have a bit of variation and striation. So I rolled a log of one of my main colors, and then I just rolled a whole bunch of little snakes of some of the supporting colors. And I kind of put them around it, roll them in so they all meld in there, and then give this a few twists. And this gives you nice stripes and striations. Flatten that out, run it through the pasta machine, fold it over, flatten it out, run it through a few times until you like the look. Something like this. And then this you can put on a texture plate. Now you can use rubber stamps like these. I used stamps, but I really wanted a much deeper impression. So I picked my texture sheets that could go through the pasta machine. You want to just spray them with a bit of Armor All as a release, and then use a paper towel and wipe up all the excess, and then go ahead and place that into the pasta machine, and it will stretch out a bit, it will get longer. I rolled this out on a 2, which is the second thickest setting on my pasta machine, and then sent it back through on a 2. And what you'll end up with is something like this. So then you have your 3 edges square, you apply some translucent liquid Sculpey to the core bead, wrap it around, trim it, and then do take a little bit of time with your clay smoother to just kind of smooth that seam a bit. On most of mine, if you look hard enough, you can find the seam, but I tried to blend it enough so that it's not real obvious. And then these you can just bake. And once they're baked and cooled, if you like, you can add an edging, like you see I did here. I extruded some clay. I wished I had a half circle extruder that would fit this size, somewhere around 4 or 5 millimeters, but the closest thing I had was these triangles. And again, you apply translucent liquid Sculpey to that edge. So you just go ahead and place that on, and then I'm going to overlap these 2 ends and use my blade to cut them both at the same time at a bit of an angle. And now remove that bit of excess on that end and that bit on that end, and they should fit together perfectly. And then, like I said, I had the triangle and not a round, so I actually took a little time. I smoothed out the seams, and some of this I kind of blended it in with the rest of the bead where I could. And then I also kind of flattened down that point of a triangle, so like on this one, it's a bit more rounded. So once your beads are baked, I like to enhance the texture with some gilder's paste. And I did a little bit of experimenting and decided I wanted a bit more of a subtle look. So you can see these 2 I've added some gilder's paste, and this one I haven't. And it's just a little bit of a difference. They just have a little bit of a glint of something, but you could add more. So I chose a few different colors of gilder's paste to accent these beads. The first one I did was patina, and I applied it all over. And you can see that really brings out the texture. But honestly, that was a bit much for me. So let me know what you think of this piece. Do you have ideas for variations? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We can all learn so much from each other. So what I did was I took a baby wipe and just wiped it back. And this will work fine as long as you haven't let it dry, just to have a bit more subtle of a look. Use a paper towel to dry it. And then I did the same thing with antique gold and African bronze. And if I decide that it's not enough, I can always go back and add more. So this is the configuration I decided on after I finished all my beads and baked them. I went ahead and added my clasp here with a jump ring. It's nice to use a jump ring so that it has a little movement. It makes it easier to fasten. And then I also decided how long it's going to be. And actually this bracelet's going to end up being about 9 inches long in the end because it's quite bulky. So I've taken a spare piece of twine and I'm just going to tie that here. And now I'm going to trim this cord so that it's just long enough to fit into this bead cap. And just cut it nice and straight across. And I'm certain I have my beads in the right order, because once you start gluing, there's really no going back. So I'm certain I'm happy with the configuration. I've got the length right, kind of double check these things. And I have here some 2-part epoxy that I mixed up. Now you could use a glue like E6000 or something, but I think the 2-part epoxy is just really strong, and I don't want any chances of my bracelet coming apart. That's my kitty. He's found me in my recording studio. And you're not going to like the 2-part epoxy, kitty cat. You might want to stay away. So I'm just going to kind of fill this, although not too much, because I don't want the cords to push it out and make a mess. That's probably good. And then we'll just stuff these in there. And sometimes it'll ooze out there, but it doesn't. It isn't right now, so we're good. And I'm actually going to snip this off now, because I don't know if you can see on this end, I left the tie on and it's kind of bunched up, and I wasn't really happy with that look. Yeah. Pull that off. Make sure all of those are shoved in there nice and tight, and then leave it to dry for as long as you need. And then on this end, of course, you'll add a chain to finish the clasp and finish your bracelet. So if you're interested in the supplies I used, click on the little eye that's over there in the upper right, or the link in the description box to go to my blog post. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Take a peek at my Patreon page for how you can get great rewards and help support these tutorials. Happy creating. Bye-bye.